Welcome to another episode of The Scriptory, where writing of every ilk is shared and writers of every corner are encouraged. This episode I'm drinking a LaCroix cran raspberry, and I don't know, I have to say, I'm really enjoying sparkling water. I've been hearing kind of more and more about it recently, and I watched the funny Game of Thrones actors commercials, and the mountain was on a SodaStream commercial, and that kind of like tipped the scales for me to try sparkling water for the first time. Because, if the mountain drinks the sparkling water, it's got to have some cred. So, I have to say that an ad actually probably influenced my decision to begin drinking sparkling water. Not SodaStream specifically, but sparkling water in general. But anyway, I don't know, I find it refreshing, and I don't mind the extremely subtle flavoring that some people find disgusting. But, to each their own. So I was going to upload one of the writing prompts I'd written for a March prompt, but I also wanted to talk about an issue that I struggle with when it comes to writing. So I figured I would change up the pace a little and just do an episode on the latter and save the story for another time so that this doesn't become an overly long episode. But if anyone says they don't mind longer episodes, just let me know in the comments, because I do think it'd be kind of cool to do a writing share and then also talk about a writing struggle or success or idea, etc. and have a segment on that too. But for the time being, I'll just do these types of episodes separately for the sake of time. So the type of writer's block I usually struggle with is writer's guilt. And I do call it a writer's block because I think that writer's block is just an umbrella term under which lies many more specific reasons for why we writers are not writing. And I think most writers would probably agree with that too. I'm not really sure where that term writer's block even came from, or why it hasn't been kind of dissected more often sooner. Because I don't know, you always just heard of writer's block, and not much discourse on what that actually means. And I really do believe that there are many, many different reasons for why each writer has a quote-unquote writer's block. I know in a recent Patrick Rothfuss interview, he was at a Comic-Con, he mentioned, he was asked this question or a similar one about writer's block in general, and he brought up the point of mental illness, and that's a valid point. Like if you have like depression or anxiety or something going on, that's a legitimate reason. That's a type of writer's block. Do those conditions explain every writer's block? No, I don't believe so. So I do believe that there are many different reasons for that. And so in this episode, I'm talking about one of those reasons. We have a writer's block, and that's writer's guilt. So when I first typed this term into Google, I got a few articles or YouTube videos about writers who feel guilty about not writing, which was honestly, that would be an amazing problem for me to have. So I had to specifically narrow my search to explain the opposite problem, that writers who feel guilty about writing. So maybe I'll do an episode about writers who feel guilty about not writing in the future. But for now, I'm posting one that's relatable to me. I know the coming article that I'm about to read is pretty long. So if you'd rather just read it, I have a link posted below so you can just read it. But for those of you who are doing something else or just don't mind listening or rather enjoy or prefer it, that's what this episode is about. So this article is 10 Ways to Kick Writer's Guilt to the Curb. It's by Colleen on writingandwellness.com. It didn't provide a last name, so here's the here's the article. Writers are at war. We fight the battle every day between writing and the rest of our lives. Sometimes writing wins. Sometimes life wins. Either way, we feel guilty. The emotion is so common in the writer's world that writer's guilt is a real term, defined by fantasy writer Victoria Griefer as feeling that you're selfish, idealistic, and irresponsible for writing when you could be doing something more profitable and practical with your time. And I don't know about you, but I am tired of feeling guilty. 5 typical reasons for writer's guilt. Scan other writing sites and you'll see them. All the many reasons we have for feeling that underlying guilt, the emotion that often stops us from experiencing the true joy that can come from our craft. Reason number 1. I'm taking time to write when I should be doing X. Fill in X with whatever you like, spending time with family, cleaning the house, working, seeing friends, helping neighbors, volunteering, walking the dog, getting a better paying job, helping your parents, making homemade cookies for your child's party, etc. I've come to realize that it just doesn't matter, says author Megan Beaumont. No matter when I decide to start my novel, I still run into trouble. Kids still want dinner every single night. Husbands still want clean socks. My kingdom for a maid. Honestly, I'd settle for a chimpanzee I can train to fold towels and match socks. Friends still get weird when you don't pay attention to them. Writer Cheryl Clark agrees. There are 1,002 things I could be doing, should be doing, other than writing. The house needs to be cleaned. I need to go grocery shopping. I really should be grading papers. I haven't called my mom in 3 weeks. Writing takes me away from everything important in my life, and most essentially, it takes me away from my family. In other words, my child. I should be playing with the kid, not making up nonsense stories no one may ever read. Reason number 2. I don't have enough to show for all the time I've spent. Our society is driven by money. Earn money for your writing, and it's easier to justify your time spent on it. Others understand money. But if you're not earning money with your writing, or you're earning less than a full-time wage, what most people seem to believe is the legitimate cutoff mark, you risk being told that you are being self-indulgent, or you may simply feel that way yourself. Since most fiction writers don't earn the equivalent of a full-time job's wages with their writing, that leaves most vulnerable to writer's guilt. It's a strange phenomenon how we tend to feel guilty for pursuing our dreams and doing something we love just because it doesn't pay the bills, says Griefer. But many of us know that guilt all too well. Even successful freelance writers experience it, particularly after spending a lot of time on a project. You receive a meager check in the mail for a piece that took weeks to write and months to sell, says freelance writer Susie Yakowitz. Suddenly your stomach twists and your mind fills with remorse. You know the feeling well. It's guilt, and it comes on you when you think you've spent too many hours writing for too little in return. Then there's the whole thing about publication. If you've been writing for years, but you still haven't been traditionally published, you'll likely come down with a case of it. With no outward rewards to show for your hard work, it can feel more like you've been wasting your time, particularly when you try to explain what you've been doing to friends and family, or even to yourself. Reason number 3. I don't write enough. Those of us who are called to write often feel guilty when we're not writing. Even if we do get in some writing time every day. We may feel that it's not enough, or we didn't get enough words down, or we didn't focus enough during that time. Quote, I know it's okay to take time off of writing, says YA author Diana Urban. Burnout is a real issue, especially for authors with full-time jobs, and everyone needs some time to re-energize. I love spending time with my husband, getting dinner with friends, going for long walks, going to the movies, and reading for pleasure. But the guilt always creeps in. I can never fully enjoy what I'm doing because I'm always thinking about how I should be writing. End quote. Poetry editor Debbie Ernie feels the same way. Quote, If you are someone who writes from time to time, you already know there are spaces between those times. I mean, there are times when you are not writing. Occasionally, those times take up the most space in your day, week, month. And I, for one, feel the guilt. The guilt that I am not writing, not creating, not sending work out for publication. End quote. Quote, What is it about writing that when we don't do it, we feel so guilty? Says writer Lisa Clifford. Is it because it's our dream, it's what we love, it's what makes us feel happy and whole, so that when we don't do it, we feel as though we are letting ourselves down? End quote. Reason number 4, I don't challenge myself enough. We all have writing dreams. Most of us have goals, where we want to be 5 or 10 years from now. Having those goals is a good way to motivate ourselves to work hard, but we may also feel guilty for not working hard enough. Says poet and writer Caroline Cabrera, Constantly I feel racked by writer's guilt, that terrible feeling, knowing that I have not written enough, have not challenged myself enough, simply have not made enough. The guilt follows me everywhere, like an overeager pet. End quote. Others of us may feel guilty that we don't go to enough conferences or take enough classes or read enough writing books or blogs or seek out enough mentors or editors to give us feedback on our work. We may look back on years of work and wonder if we've improved at all. Reason number 5. I feel guilty about what I'm writing about. If you're writing a memoir, it can be easy to fall into this trap. You don't want to offend anyone, but you also want your story to be as true as possible. Or maybe one of your fictional characters is based on a real person, and you feel guilty about using that person in your writing. You take the usual steps to protect them, such as changing names, appearances, and settings, but still, the guilt is there, particularly if you happen to see that person often. Or maybe you are writing about a topic that makes you uncomfortable. Quote, I am currently working on a story in which sexual abuse occurs, says one concerned writer. And if people ask me what I'm writing about, I can't even say it out loud because I'm afraid of what they'll think of me, writing about stuff like that. End quote. Writer's guilt is not about doing anything wrong. Maybe your guilt comes from other sources. Maybe you feel guilty for financial reasons. Spending money on conferences, writing supplies, or editing services when you're not making enough to cover those expenses with your writing. Maybe you haven't sent out enough submissions in your opinion. Or you haven't spent enough time marketing your latest book. Maybe you know you haven't taken enough risks, that you've been playing it safe, and you feel guilty about the fear that holds you back. Whatever the source of your guilt, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is realizing that this sort of guilt, this constant nagging negative emotion, is doing nothing but dragging you down and making it harder for you to reach your writing goals, whatever they may be. Guilt can be a constructive emotion if it causes you to take action. If you feel guilty for having hurt someone's feelings, for example, or for having done something truly wrong, then guilt can motivate you to make amends, which will improve your life. Most things we feel guilty about as writers, though, have nothing to do with doing anything wrong. Instead, it's all about choices. If you choose to spend time with family rather than write, and then you feel guilty for not writing, you didn't do anything wrong, necessarily. If you spent the last 10 years working on a project that never gets published, you didn't do anything wrong either. You simply made choices. Those choices may have been right or wrong for you, but they were not moralistically right or wrong. Feeling guilty about these kinds of choices, though, is useless unless that guilt causes you to take constructive action to improve your life. If, for example, after feeling guilty about spending time with your family, you review your schedule and commit to more writing time, then that guilt had a positive purpose. If, however, you make that change and then continue to feel guilty because now you're writing and not spending time with family, you are simply allowing yourself to remain in an endless cycle of guilt that will slowly erode both your writing and your family life. Why not make the choice to allow writing to give you all the joy that it can? Quote, "Our society has placed on us a double standard," says writer David C. Hughes. "On one hand, if we're having fun, it must be a waste of time. On the other hand, society says, just do it, that having fun is everything. But understand this, it's okay to enjoy writing. In fact, the more you enjoy it, the more your passion will shine through, and the more your passion shines through, the more others will engage with you." End quote. 10 ways to get past writer's guilt. If you, like me, are tired of feeling writer's guilt all the time, or much of the time, try these solutions. 1. Compare writing to other things you do. Do you feel guilty cleaning the bathroom, spending time watching an hour of TV, going out with friends, getting a manicure, playing a game of tennis? If you think about it, all of these things could be considered a lot less productive than writing, yet we rarely feel guilty about doing them. 2. Realize how much wasting time others do. When at your writing desk, especially if you haven't been published yet, you may worry that you are wasting your time. Consider for a moment how much wasting time others do. According to a survey by Salary.com, the average company employee spends 1.7 hours a day on non-productive activities, including socializing, surfing the net, and taking long breaks. When you are writing, you're being more productive with your leisure time than many people are with their supposed productive time. 3. Imagine what else you would be doing with your time. If you didn't write, be honest about what you'd do with that time. Would you be happier with the results? What about 10, 20, or 30 years from now? Would you be happy with what you chose to do? Would you be happy that you chose to do something else besides write? 4. Consider our culture's obsession with money. We have an idea in this country that only money-making activities are worthwhile. But this point of view isn't good for us. Studies show that working too many hours increases our risk for heart disease, depression, and other side effects of stress. One study even found that compared to those who worked 40 hours a week, those who worked 55 showed poorer vocabulary and reasoning. It was like the extra work actually made them less intelligent. Instead of focusing strictly on activities that provide external rewards such as money and position, realize that a balanced life involves those activities like writing that provide us with intrinsic rewards, that give us pleasure and help us find meaning. 5. Tune into your feelings for clues. Do you resent it when you agree to spend time away from writing? If so, ask yourself if that's good for you. Does it make you a better person to sacrifice what you'd rather do to please someone else, or to follow some pattern you believe you should follow? Or are you a better person when you commit to your writing? 6. Realize that writing is good for you. Would you feel guilty exercising, eating right, or doing other things that are good for you? Of course not. Put writing in the same category. 7. Create a journal of your daily activities. This can be really helpful if you're feeling like you're spending too much or too little time on writing. Give yourself some real data to work with by keeping a journal for at least a week. Examine how you're spending your time and then take action. If you're truly neglecting your family, you'll see it in your journal, and you'll be able to make adjustments. if it's the other way around, you'll be able to do the same. Allow your guilty feelings to compel you to action. Number 8, remember that you are not perfect. We try to be, don't we? We try to be perfect parents, spouses, caretakers, employees, business owners, and more all at the same time. But trying to be perfect is a losing battle and will keep you in the guilt circle. Break out by forgiving yourself and use every day to start fresh. Number 9, realize when others are trying to manipulate you. Others will use the term selfish to manipulate us into doing things we don't really want to do. Don't let them suck you in with statements like, "I know I'm not that important to you." Check in with your guilt and take action if you need to make changes, but otherwise hold to your writing commitments and don't allow others to make you feel bad. Example, "I'll call you back at 3 when my writing time is over." Better yet, let them leave a message. Number 10, make peace with your choices. We all make choices in life. If we decide to pursue our writing dreams, that's a choice. How we go about it is also a choice. Trust yourself. Make the choices that you need to make, and then don't apologize. You will likely have to make adjustments along the way, many of them, particularly as things change in your life and in your writing. Take time to reevaluate when you need to, but then make your choices and be brave enough to commit to them wholeheartedly. No guilt. So in the end, when all else fails, realize that writer's guilt is a part of life for most writers. Hey, you're part of the club. Quote, "At any point, one is either writing or not writing," says Cabrera. While writing, one can identify as a writer. While not writing, we need this guilt to remember who we are and what we want. The guilt makes us writers, or at least helps us remember to identify that way. And so that, again, was an article on writingandwellness.com that was actually written 4 years ago already, July 21st, 2015, by Colleen. I guess I don't need to do a separate episode on writers who feel guilty about not writing. I guess I wasn't aware that the article would touch upon that quite heavily, but I found that this article really was an interesting read and pretty helpful for the most part. But again, like, an article isn't going to change how we feel or how we react with our choices. It's just kind of just a reminder that we're not alone, and there are ways to work around that feeling. I really did like that last quote, that the guilt makes us writers. The guilt makes us writers, or at least helps us remember to identify that way. I really feel like it's probably the latter bit. I don't think the guilt makes us writers, but I do think that it's a pretty good indicator that that is how we identify ourselves. I find that really interesting. Maybe not even just with writing, but also in other aspects of my life. But yeah, so I don't know, do you guys struggle with writer's guilt? Either the feeling of guilt of not writing, and then the feeling of guilt of writing? And if so, how do you personally manage it? I would really like to hear what you guys think about this article and this idea. And I actually, like, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I actually do think that I do struggle with kind of both sides of that coin, because I do like feel like, oh man, I should have written today, or yeah, like, I guess I do have that type of guilt as well. But yeah, and then it's like, as soon as I start writing, I feel like, like I could be doing XXX other thing, especially when the weather is nice. because we don't have a crazy amount of really nice days around here. So um, today it's just cold and rainy and snowy and miserable, and it's the end of April. So I don't think I'll have much guilt actually pulling up my document and getting some writing done. But anyway, so let leave your comments below and let me know what you guys think about this article. Um, Let me know if you'd like another episode that covers a different type of writer's block. I guess I could do kind of like a writer's block series. This one being about writer's guilt. So, yeah, let me know what you think. And as always, keep on writing.